Hello, everybody, and welcome back for our final session of day 2 of part 1 of IDEAS 2020. So, as I said before, we will be bringing AT back for the Q&A session at the end. So if you've got questions, keep firing them through to me. I've got a few gathered up for him, and we'll piece them all up together. So good chance and good opportunity for me to say thank you to Microsoft for being our headline sponsor for this event. It's been such a pleasure being here in Microsoft TV, and we're looking forward to being back in the studio for part 2, 13th and 14th of October, just in case you haven't heard me say that 10 times before so far. So introductions, we have John Ragg and then we have MacLeod, and I'm going to hand over to them. This is a very exciting thing for New Zealand. So over to you.
Cool. Hey, thanks, Jenny. And actually, it's been really a lot of fun having MOD, NZDIA, New Zealand Defence come in the office and have a bit of a chat. It's been great to be able to host the location here, and everyone's been very good in accommodating and kind of chatting to us. So it's been some really interesting sort of conversations, and that's kind of the thing that we like. We're very social people, aren't we, Fee?
We are.
So I'm John Ragg. I've worked at Microsoft now for about 7 years. Typically just hanging around the public sector accounts, which means I kind of probably spend most of my time in Wellington, the occasional bit of time in Seattle. We don't tend to do Auckland as much, which we would like to do a little bit more of. So a couple of things we're going to talk about today. We're going to focus on the Microsoft Data Center. We just had a fantastic session from AT Ball, which kind of positioned what we do kind of globally. And we want to boil it down to what are we actually going to do here in New Zealand, because there's some cool things that happen in the US, cool things that happen in Canada, the cool things that happen in UK and the Five Eyes, and often we're a little bit jealous of that when it comes down in New Zealand. But what are we actually doing in New Zealand? And I suppose one of the first things to kind of mention, and I'm sure everyone's seen the press. If you haven't seen the press, you probably know that, well, if you haven't seen the press, then you don't know, but Microsoft is establishing a data center. Well, not just one data center, we're establishing a region down here in New Zealand. And so we're in the process of going through the various approvals that were required to actually build this here. And it's a very major thing for Microsoft, but 2 for New Zealand Incorporated. And so we'll talk about a number of those sort of things today. Cover off a bunch of questions, and I suppose we're probably still in the NDA type sort of perspective at the moment. So there'll be some things that we can and can't talk about, and because we're recording it, you might actually need to have a conversation if you want to get into a little bit more depth. So we're going to talk today about why cloud, adoption of cloud in New Zealand today. So what are people actually doing, and then what's coming to New Zealand, and how can we as industry leverage that for New Zealand's benefit, including defence and other customers. So really a couple of kind of key slides, and you almost could see a version of this from a number of different vendors and suppliers around why do customers actually move to the cloud? What is this thing about the cloud? And AT probably covered a number of those sort of things today, but we'll cover a couple more. So data center exit. Historically, I suppose in New Zealand, we had a number of customers were told, look, don't buy any more tin. You've got to put it into an in-country data center. You've got to put your IaaS in there. 1, you're not good at managing it, and 2, your systems are a bit old. And so that kind of happened. That was kind of the first piece of the evolution to take the appropriate workloads and put them into someone else's data center. The data center is an in-country data center often. However, at the same time, a number of customers have taken workloads and trusted Microsoft and other cloud vendors with those. And so that's part of our conversation every day, and we'll kind of expand on that as we go. A number of customers, and even today, have the end of support. So running SQL 2008 or 2003, and they often call us up and they go, hey, I've got this really old stuff. What should I do with it? We understand that applications that run on the sort of older software, they're troublesome to support. It's hard to find people. You've got to go get people my age to be able to support it and understand how to patch it, etc. And, you know, we're kind of running out of time for our employment. I'm just kidding. You're picking up there on the theme of AT. Did anybody like his comment to Jenny there about, Jenny, you're far too young to be selling? I thought he's a smooth guy, that AT. We're lucky to work with him. Another thing that customers move is when you move to Azure, why would you do that? Well, a lot of our advanced technology is living in Azure, and so customers are using that today. So our cognitive services, which is object recognition, so understanding that that's a camera, that's an apple, that's a person of interest, that sort of thing, that type of compute, if you like, you typically can't do that yourself, and often in-country data centers you can't do that. There's simply not the capacity in those to be able to do those high-performing programs quickly, and that's kind of what we can do in Azure, and it's what our customers are doing today. Often we find security breaches as well. Customers call us up and say, whoops, there's something going on, like one of our unfortunate New Zealand customers at the moment, a DDoS attack going on, and they go, how do maybe I prevent that? Well, one of the ways you can prevent that is make us, as a cloud vendor, responsible for your security. So take your applications out of the on-premise, or even in the on-premise, the in-country data center, move it to Azure and make the security responsibility ours. That's a big thing for us. Also, the innovation and the DevOps. A lot of people talk about spinning up, spinning down dev and test environments. How do you actually do that? How do you use the utility compute of something like a cloud? That's what we do very well. And again, lots of our customers are doing that. Sustainability is a really interesting one. And we're kind of seeing that. I don't know if we're going to see a bit of a picture on that around election sort of time of sustainability. Kind of thought there would have been a little bit more of that with Greens as part of the coalition. But sustainability about how are you actually looking after your estate, not only your IT estate, your vehicle estate, your building estate. Do New Zealand's largest organisations, even government organisations, understand what their actual CO2 footprint is, their carbon footprint? Do they actually understand if the building is safe and secure? Do they actually understand if the rooms are used or not used? And the answer to that is not very often. So we have a conversation, which is a global conversation and a local conversation, about how we can help our customers moving to a sustainable sort of business. We can help on energy efficiency, we can help on vehicle efficiency, we can help on building efficiency. And often we go into these customers who are moving into a new headquarters and say, we'd like to talk to you about a smarter building or a smarter city, because this is something that we've done globally. And it comes down to, well, I haven't really budgeted for that. I'm just pretty much going to get a piece of concrete, put some wire in it, and we're going to be good to go. And I'm going to squish people into a smaller sort of space and we'll be okay. But that's kind of not good enough. Thanks, Fee. Just change the next slide there. Cool. Do you want to have a chat for a second? Who are you?
Hi, everyone. So I think I won't cover in depth around defence and Azure, because I think that AT has covered that really well in the previous session. But just really wanted to touch on some of these key themes again before we head off into the New Zealand region and what that means for defence. So the Azure platform that we're building globally through JEDI is really focused around these key requirements for that we see for defence in a technical world and a technology world. To help with mission support, so supporting the field, being able to scale up quickly, synchronization, so making sure that information is synchronized quickly and in real time across the landscape. And we see that operationally these things aren't necessarily well supported in the field today. And so why is Azure the answer for defence? So we think that the key thing is the hybrid capability in Azure. And we've seen AT touched a lot on this before, and particularly in New Zealand, it has been a challenge in New Zealand in the past in terms of data sovereignty, latency and things like that, not having resources on the ground in New Zealand. And we have solved for that with our networking and so forth, but hybrid has really filled the gap there. But again, even with landing a region or a data centre in New Zealand, there's still that capability gap out in the field, and this is where hybrid really comes into its own for defence. And the ability for us to pull that all together and make that seamless, whether you're on-premise, whether you are using our stack technology, whether you're using our Databox Edge and our Edge capability, the ability to pull that all together from an operational and governance perspective is really, really key, because having to manage different technologies, different workloads in different ways becomes really problematic and really restricts the scale. So that is key, is that seamless governance across all of those areas of your IT infrastructure. I'll hand over to John to this one, and then we'll move into some more about the about what's happening in New Zealand and our region.
Cool, thanks, V. So one of the questions was asked, what did COVID actually do for technology? And I think what we saw is the adoption of unified comms type sort of technology, remote technology. You've been able to do video conferences, jump into a Teams meeting room, have a quick call, have a quick collaboration was fantastic. A lot of our customers would typically do that project over 3 to 6 months, sometimes maybe even 9 months. They want to roll these things out slowly. All of a sudden, they're out of the offices, out of the main head office. They're all trying to dial into a system that is not capacity planned for that high volume of remote users. And what we saw is that systems were falling over left, right, and center. And so our customers came to us and said, actually, that technology you've been talking to us about, that stuff called Teams, can we turn it on? And by the way, we want it on in 3 days, and we want thousands of users across this. And so that's the challenge that Microsoft's been doing. But as AC said, a lot of customers had already been in the cloud. It was just for a number of other customers that were kind of running a bit slow. In terms of Microsoft agreement with government, we have roughly 280,000 people who are licensed to use our technology, the Teams technology, and some of it was kind of sitting on the shelf, or some of it was in the process of customers implementing it. And so when you're in the middle of implementing it, you're not actually using the technology. And all of a sudden you need to use the technology, and you've never seen it before, so it needs to be very quick and up and running. And the second piece there is, now I've turned this technology on, is maybe I should turn on some of those great security tools that you've provided for me as well, Microsoft, because now I'm collaborating with people in my organization across my team. I'm working from home on a different device, and also I'm collaborating across agencies, or maybe I've got an NGO that I work with. So life's changing a little bit. And so what we've seen is not only the adoption of the Teams functionality for video conferencing, but also turning on the security, which has been fantastic for us. So it's been a great conversation. The Dynamics customers as well. And so Dynamics for us is our CRM suite and our financial suite. We've taken those from being on-premises sort of solution, typically living in a server in country. We've moved that functionality up and put the Dynamics software into the cloud as well. And so again, we've got this approach here where we can be in the cloud, and we've still got some customers on-premise. And so you would see some kind of interest around that. Pretty much every tender that's come out, I would say 99 tenders that have come out in recent times are asking for an online platform for stakeholder management, customer management, workflow management, low code, no code type sort of thing. And that's the space that our Dynamics suite's in. With Azure, we've had a number of customers that have taken everything from the in-country and moved that to the cloud, but not enough of them. We've had a number of customers who have turned on the dev and test. A number of them turned on the integration. A number of them turned on 1 or 2 mission critical applications. But we're still in the sweet spot there of moving our customers from an on-premises world to a cloud world. And that often just takes time. And so cloud has changed that. One of the other things that's kind of changed it is the operating model for the customer. So as you move these technologies, what does your skill set look like? Did you always look after your own Exchange previously? Or maybe you want to look after it now with Exchange Online. And what is there to actually look after an Exchange Online? Because it's pretty much taking people on or taking people off, making sure the security's there. We're pretty much taking care of the patching. So it's quite a different operating model for customers. It's also quite a different operating model for our partners. Our partners picked that up very, very quickly. A number of smaller partners, in fact, picked it up faster than the traditional outsourced customers. But it's been great to see the customers and the partners kind of work through this operating model together and work out almost a hybrid or blended approach for who looks after what bit, who looks after the legacy, who looks after the bit we've just moved. And that's been a really interesting sort of conversation. We did highlight these 3 examples, and we'll talk about those in a second because they're really relevant for New Zealand.
And I guess I'll just add to that 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 adoption of M365, more or less being very widespread now in government. What that does is it does help. It has helped customers get their heads around what cloud looks like, how to run it, how to operate under it, which is going to give everyone a really big head start for as we start to go into and they start to adopt more services on the Azure platform and start to really whole scale migrate onto Azure. Right, so just moving on into what the New Zealand region means for us. So this is probably a slide that you would have seen before, potentially. And it just represents all of our regions around the world. Now this grows pretty, on an annual basis. It just grows continuously with building new regions. So the blue dots here are the regions that we have. The little grey dots, they're sort of what we refer to as the edge, so points of presence. We have one of those in Auckland, and the massive network that joins us all together. Now, one of the things that people may or may not know about Microsoft is we are probably the biggest connectivity provider in the world. So we own our own WAN. It doesn't, anything you put on to Azure doesn't hit the public internet. So, and we've basically joined all of our regions up through this massive connectivity globally around the world. So New Zealand is now joining in that as an official region. It will be named New Zealand North, are we allowed to say that? And what we have to remember to call it is we hear a lot that we're building a data centre in New Zealand. What we're actually building is a region, which is a set of data centres. That means, and we're also bringing all three clouds. So that's Dynamics 365, that's M365 and Azure.
So it can build on that slide.
Oh, sorry, there's a
go.
build. There we go. So all three clouds will be provided in that region. So that's really huge. And this isn't a picture of the data centre. It is a picture of a data centre that somewhere in the world. And this really just to talk about how does Microsoft build data centres? And we do, the other thing that people ask us is whether we're going to be repurposing data centres that already exist in New Zealand. And the answer is no, we build new. And that's because, when we're building these regions around the world and these data centres around the world, we have a very definitive blueprint about how we build them. We've also have got really good at them. So, got a really programmatic approach to how we do that and how they need to look and how we build them to deliver the services that we deliver. So, so that's it in a nutshell. I think, we don't have any timeframes and, no firm timeframes. Things will start to firm up as we go. And as John mentioned, we do share more details with customers under NDA, customer by customer. So just reach out to your account executive if you need, or your partner manager if you'd like to get a bit more detail on it. But really exciting for us and just provides a whole new, whole new set of options for the defence industry, as well as the rest of government.
I think it was also really interesting in that middle of COVID-19 when Jacinda had been on stage for a number of times talking about the number of people who are infected. This was the first piece of good news that she could actually talk about. She said New Zealand is open for business and Microsoft is investing in New Zealand. So I think that's fantastic. It shows a large corporate has looked at New Zealand as a kind of like a safe harbour type sort of place. We've got a relatively safe, stable government. We don't tend to change the rules. We don't tend to play silly political games, regardless of the parliament that's in at the time or the party that's in at the time. Very stable sort of platform. And what's really interesting for us is, I suppose, as our data centre does open up, as these kind of workloads are in there, these will come over time. So the Azure first, Microsoft 365 kind of next, kind of coming in shortly afterwards, and Dynamics coming in after that. We fully expect that a bunch of workloads that live in Australia today in the data centres there and some of the Singapore workloads, they'll probably come to New Zealand for our stability as well. And so you'll start to see in the press some announcements of some kind of cornerstone tenants, type of organisations who you would expect to be kind of signing up for this data centre. And we're doing a massive amount of work with those companies. But what's interesting is the doors aren't open and we haven't signed anything. And so there's an awful lot that we can do beforehand. There's an awful lot of preparation that we're doing now. There's an awful lot of workloads that we can use Australia for. And that's really what the customers are talking to us about. It's also not just talking. You have to prove this model out in terms of, we talked about it before, is what is the operating model? Well, now you actually have a chance to, one, train your people, two, start working on the model, then you actually have to work out kind of what that is. If we wait a small period of time before these doors open, then we're behind. We're further behind. But if we actually start now, which the customers are doing with us, then when the doors are open, we can safely move those workloads back across to New Zealand if that's the appropriate thing to do. And that'll be different for every customer.
Yeah, and I think to that point, just going back to that connectivity and the regions and the the massive capability we've already built globally. When we work with customers today, and even in an M365, where most people are using that, and that will be using one of our offshore regions, and I think that's to date been thoroughly successful for customers. So we sort of expect to see this continue in customers, that this doesn't change anything about customers' cloud strategies and adoption plans as we go. It just offers yet another option and capability set more locally or more close to home once it gets here. This is just a little bit, I won't go into a huge amount of detail on this, but I guess the messaging here is that for those of you familiar with how we build our availability portfolio and how you build for resiliency, we'll actually, the region will have availability zones on offer for this region, which is great, so that you can have separation between zones and between actual data centres to give you that additional resiliency. Will also be, Australia's an obvious target point to do site recovery, to go outside of our New Zealand geography, and that's a very valid solution for that extra resiliency that you need.
I think just on that point as well, we're publishing white papers on that. We've just released a white paper last week talking about the architecture and some of the technical and non-technical folks who want to kind of drill down into that. We can make kind of people available for sort of conversations around that. But this diagram in particular it's not an NDA diagram. This is what we've published in our white paper last week. So go look out for that. And if you do want links to the white paper, etc., then Fee or myself can help you out on that.
Yeah. I think the point here is that, there's already, really strong resiliency options within Azure today. You can get a very resilient solution within Azure today as it stands, and that will only get, the New Zealand region will only strengthen that position. So just going back to, and this is probably when sort of moving into, the how, which is how we're working not just with defence but across the government sector to start to prepare for helping customers move to cloud. And as John said before, starting to get your strategies in place and your plans in place to move to start to work towards going cloud now and in the future. So this is kind of a bit of a standard Microsoft framework around moving to the cloud, and what we typically see and the process that people generally go through is sort of focusing on a migrate piece first, and that's migrating and optimizing. So while we say lift and shift isn't really lift and shift, because you get a lot of optimization and drive a lot of capability just by landing yourself on the platform. That drives a lot of operational efficiencies. And from a defence perspective, when we talking about infrastructure as a service and a platform, that part of that is your hybrid capability, so your stack and your edge devices, but particularly the stack. From there, what we then see customers doing is taking those workloads, taking that infrastructure, taking those applications, and starting to leverage the platform, the data and the capabilities, the machine learning, the AI, and the serverless type application development technologies to really start to drive that transformation and innovation using the platform. And this is where our partners come in and play a massive part in terms of the solutions that they are building and developing on the platform that they work with our customers on and sell to our customers day in and day out. So really key.
I think that's a really important point, is that when Azure turns up, it won't just be Azure IEAS. You won't just be able to put your applications in there, the full machine learning suite, the cognitive suite, the translation suite. And so what that means is that you get an awful lot of functionality available that you can move very quickly on. So say, for instance, you'd take an interview of somebody, then you've got transcription services available. That's living here in New Zealand. Often from the sovereignty perspective, people are a little bit worried about that data. Oh, whoops, I'm not too sure how that data should be classified, or where that data needs to live, or is it New Zealand eyes only? Well, if we've got transcription services here available in New Zealand, then that's a different conversation that we have. Cognitive service from our perspective is the object recognition. So is that an apple? Is that an orange? Is that a human? Is that a human we've seen before? There's some ethics in AI because the data is available and the technology is available. We've now got to decide as both citizens and industry, are we comfortable with that technology being used in that way? And so that's a lot of the conversation that you'll see from Microsoft around the ethics in AI and also the sustainability, right? We're here to try change things. But when Azure arrives in New Zealand, don't expect it to just be a place where you can put your boring old servers, right? Move it from here to there. That's not the proposition that we're offering.
So in terms of working with our customers to be ready and get ready, this is a very high level summary of the framework that we take customers through to take you from strategy right through to landing on the platform and managing it, operating and optimizing it, getting you operationally cloud ready and being able to transform your organization to operate in the cloud. This is, not waterfall by any means. You'll be at different stages, maybe even at different stages for different things, which is great and fine. But I would highly recommend that you, go away and have a look at this. This is all online. This is developed, lots and lots of detail under this, and developed, based on customer and Microsoft experience over the last decade around cloud. So I guess what I just wanted to point out on this slide is that we're actually, in terms of readiness for moving to cloud, we are working with our customers, our government customers, on we've got very comprehensive programs to help support you do these activities. Particularly, when we start to look at things like planning and readiness, we have tools, we have our partners really enabled to be able to help do this with you, as to start to build migration plans, start to build application modernization plans. And, that doesn't have to take a lot of, that doesn't, with the tools and the expertise and the knowledge that we can all collectively, as an industry, as a Microsoft and partner ecosystem provide, we can actually help you really accelerate that process. And, remember that, you won't be the first organisation to necessarily do this, and what we can bring to the table there is experience on how others have done it and the best way to go about things. I just noted that, and a good resource, and from AT's presentation earlier, with the DoD cloud strategy and having that publicly available is absolute gold. I think for any defence industry organisations to be able to leverage and use as a good starting point. So the key there is just to come and have a discussion with the Microsoft team, have a discussion with your partners as well about all the things that we can do to help you get ready and prepare for that journey. That includes training and upskilling for your people, to get people upskilled and certified on all of these new technologies. Anything to add there, John?
No, I think it's a good example. Today was deliberate to have AT on, not only as an expert in the defence industry, but it was Microsoft demonstrating that we're local folks with a global reach. The experience that we have on other customers, other sites, other environments is vitally important. We bring that to the New Zealand marketplace together with our partners, so that we can all be successful, because as Fee says, it's probably whatever you've come up with, a bright new idea, it's unlikely That's the first thing that first time that we've come up with that problem. However, if it is, we're happy to embrace that as well. It's not that New Zealand's always going to be miles behind people. We've got lots of New Zealand business who've backed Microsoft and Azure specifically to be kind of global leaders. There's some fantastic stories about that. And they're very gracious with their time as they link up together with our other customers, bring them all on the journey. So that's something that Microsoft looks to bring to the table as experience.
Yeah, and I think that probably feeds well into the next point around the partner continuum and the the big partner network that we use to help us with these new projects and initiatives with customers. And just further to John's point around so that innovation space where we were thinking of new things to do, as well as helping you do sort of migrate type stuff and general app modernization. The other things that we really love to do, and we do this with partners, is to work with you on your new ideas. And the great thing about cloud is that it's not the big sort of rigmarole that you would have had, that people had to go through in the past to get a pilot or a proof of concept off the ground. We can literally stand these things up in days, try them out, and if they don't work, it isn't the big expense or the big wasted investment that it used to be. And so we're really enjoying doing a lot of those with partners as doing joint innovation POCs and pilots. But along with that, our partners really support us in terms of helping to deliver just the even modernized managed services, cloud operations into our customers to help them get ready to adopt the platform. So I think that might be our last slide, John.
Cool. No, thanks. Hey, look, thanks very much. Jenny, maybe do you want to take over from here? Do you want us to sit down or do some interpret dance or something like that?
So I was planning on the dance.
Oh, good.
And then I thought I'd stay off camera so that there's only so much room. So I think I thought we might start back to we'll start with the data center project. So the interesting thing about our defence industry community in New Zealand is that virtually nobody does only defence, and they're involved in all sorts of businesses. So we'll have a lot of people watching who are very interested about the construction and about the building of the data center. So a couple of questions around opportunities for New Zealand businesses to bring some new innovations that you haven't used overseas. Because I noted the slide where we were talking about, you're good at this, you have an expertise. How much opportunity for New Zealand to inject some things you've not seen for this build? For
the data center build, probably the data center build will be the black box that sits in the background. We'll let that part of Microsoft that does that very well. They'll build that. They know exactly what they want to build. The opportunity for the partners is not in the building and construction of that, although I'm sure there'll be some form of contracting arrangement, which is beyond our control. The opportunity really is more for the software vendors who, one, build software, or two, resell software. If they're putting that on our platform, that's of interest, right? And if they think about using Australia in the short term and then bringing that technology to New Zealand, that's really the conversation that we're probably better off at having, rather than I've got a great way of building a data center, because we've kind of got a rough idea on that. We're doing that every day, and so we're not interested in that conversation. Well, at least our part isn't. We probably can't help on that conversation.
Yeah. But would you be able to help introduce our construction members to the right people?
That's an offline conversation. I'm not.
So,
I think we're probably better off with the software vendor part rather than the construction part. The construction part we can't really influence. You can imagine there's multiple regions going on at the same time. We've made some massive announcements around different countries. That team's kind of well mobilized, well contracted, well in place. And if the contracting firms locally, the construction firms locally were to be engaged, they'd probably be engaged already. So all we're doing is interfering in a space we can't help with.
So the NDAs will already be in place.
They'll all be in place.
So that's exciting, because that indicates progress and speed, which is what we want.
We still need the OIA approval. That's the first kind of step, overseas investment approval, and so that's a process that goes through. So all of that goes through. Once all that becomes public, and then we'll probably talk about the location of the data center roughly. All those sort of things will kind of take care of themselves.
Awesome. That's good. I often say that it's as valuable to know that there's no opportunity as there is to know that there is one. So that's helpful.
Yeah.
So, but everybody watching can come talk to you anyway.
Yeah, they can come talk to us.
Because they will.
So software people can come talk to us is probably the better example. And if you're not on our platform, then we'll help you get on our platform. If you're on somebody else's platform and you'd like to be on our platform as well, then we can help you with that. Those are the sort of conversations that we can have. That's where we're best off.
So, AT's ready. Good. So I'm just going to pull AT in to join us. I thought I was off camera and I'm not. Got my worst half. So we're just going to, there we go.
Hey, I've joined, Jenny. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, no, nice, good and clear, and the picture's good. So welcome back.
Fantastic. I really loved the briefing by John and Fee. I tell you, we are so well served by our local team in New Zealand. They've just done a fabulous job. And now with the data center, I should say the regional build, the delivery capability is going to really be expanded for what we can provide to defense and intelligence, and really across all of government and even the commercial sector.
Thanks, AT.
Okay. So let's throw a question to AT. So the one we didn't get to before we lost you. So the question is NZDF's XIE architecture based on US DoD architecture delivered under JEDI?
I would say there are some definite, and I don't think that's by accident at all. It's just inspiration between NZDF and our Microsoft team, particularly our services folks who work very closely with NZDF.
So absolutely similarities, and we've leveraged things that the US have come up and other countries have come up with. So the concept really is I can run my applications anywhere. The XIE is just for running it anywhere, if you like, information anywhere. And so we can run it in the cloud, or we can run it in the stack, or we could run that stack in a ship. And what we're talking about is not having the high volume of applications that our customers tend to have that are unintegrated. So we're talking about, can I run this information here safely and securely in the cloud? Can I run this information maybe in a forward deployed type sort of thing? Can I run this information in a car or a fire truck? Those sort of things are what we're talking about. And that's kind of what our fabric of Azure offers. And so the fabric and the software, everything that runs Azure has been made available in those various configurations that AT showed, the various large containers to small containers to a backpack that sits on there. What we would say is you would always use Big Azure first, and you would train your models in Big Azure, and then you would take the outputs of those models. Maybe it's a algorithm for checking an object, checking the orange versus an apple. You can take that algorithm, right-click, and deploy to a backpack, so that if a forward deployed person is walking along and they wanted to say the difference between an apple or an orange, you could say that. And that's what our cognitive services does. And so the same thing that runs in this small little backpack is a subset of the stuff that runs in Big Azure. So yeah, sorry, you cut out there for a second, AT. I thought I'd cover that off, probably not as eloquently as yourself.
No, I think you did a fine job, John.
Good. So next question. We've had a few cyber attacks, quite public ones this week in New Zealand. Are you seeing any better way forward between striking that balance between security and not even being able to get through the door? So how do we make sure that as government departments get hit, that they don't become so paranoid that they lock down as to how to connect with people?
We've several customers around the world move their public-facing websites into Azure as a way to help leverage the inherent capability of Azure to protect from DDoS type attacks. We've seen that in several governments in Asia specifically. I love the case study from the U.S. Army. The U.S. Army 2 or 3 years ago migrated all of their public-facing websites to Azure. It was a total of 802 or 803 websites. And to run, sustain, operate, secure those websites, it was costing them about $40,000 a month, which is not an inordinate amount of money, but they were in different types of environments, different levels of security, just a patchwork framework of public-facing websites. We migrated all of that to Azure, primarily for enhanced security, but also to reduce costs. So they took 800 and something websites, moved them into Azure. That was costing them around $40,000 a month, and it reduced their cost to about, I think it was $24,000 a year, not a month, a year. So reduce costs and enhance security. Again, normally you got to pay trade-offs for that. But that's the thing about leveraging cloud technologies. It breaks a lot of rules in terms of cost-benefit ratios.
It's interesting, and I had a conversation with a customer who was most concerned on Friday at 4:30 afternoon. They were talking about DDoS attacks, and they said, we need to turn on all your advanced security because there's some stuff that we haven't done because we're really concerned about DDoS attacks and we're under attack. And we had the conversation with the engineer who can see into the site. They said, your web page is in Azure. If you're under attack, we're taking care of that for you. The security is turned on. We could tweak this little button a little bit more. That gives you more robust information, more logs about what's actually occurring. But your web page is up. It's been up for 6 months. You're not in the situation where you actually need to change or do anything. You've trusted us with it. Versus the unfortunate situation with, or situations around New Zealand where that's actually not the case. And now they're in this, whoops, how much money can I throw at it, how quickly to solve this sort of problem, right? It's an unfortunate situation, but that's what we're seeing time and time again. And the people who are doing the DDoS attacks are, the money organizations, right? They're not the little script kiddie from Aotearoa who's having some fun or defacing a web page. This is an organized business, and we know that, and we can all read about that. So unfortunate situation, but we're seeing customers with trusted relationships coming to Microsoft and saying, can you actually help us out of this situation? Can you help enable us? Can we turn on your advanced security? We spend an awful lot of money on security each year, and all of that money that we spend and all the expertise we have is available to our customers to use. Some of it we talked about from a COVID situation. Some of it had sat on the shelf for a period of time. They actually hadn't turned it on. Happy to say that we've turned that on for the majority of them now. So, and the philosophy across all our clouds is the same, and our philosophy across the on-premises version of our software is the same as well. Often customers go, well, I'll get around to that security thing later on. It's like, I'll probably get a project manager on the next project later on as well. It's one of those things where sometimes we remove costs because it's time and complexity. If we have a decent project manager, then things get done. If we don't have a decent project manager, then things happen when they happen or not.
Yeah. Yes, I did wonder if the trouble with lots of Netflix over lockdown was too many spy movies and people going back to the typewriter. And some days it's like, is that real or is that movie world? So Ati, anything from you on that security balance between accessibility and security?
Well, I think what you're seeing with cloud technologies, as I mentioned with the U.S. Army example, is traditionally there were a lot of trade-offs between accessibility and security. But with the advent of cloud technologies and the security that we've imbued in our cloud technology, to John's description earlier and his point, it really obviates a lot of the customer additional security protocols, which might limit accessibility in this case, because the cloud is already providing that shield. And so I think more and more, even though we're in an incredible age of state actors playing in this space with state-sponsored attacks, we're going to see private commercial companies like Microsoft lead the protection of nation states with our cloud technology and our cybersecurity professionals. It's not well known, but we do have a global incident response team. We had another country in Asia that was attacked across their financial markets. This was circa 2014, 2015, if I remember correctly, by an adversary, nation state adversary. and the capital markets in that country crashed, and they lost 25% of their value over the course of a day before they shut down the markets. And of course, bringing in the Microsoft team to help reestablish the proper security protocols was a huge benefit to that government. That, again, Microsoft, we don't talk about those sort of things, but I can assure you part of the discussions as we deploy our cloud technologies in the region in Australia will also be to deploy the latest cybersecurity capabilities in that region.
So, John, any question you'd like to ask yourself and then answer?
No, I think we're good. I think we'll just follow up with thank you very much for the opportunity. I think it's been a fantastic couple of days. We look forward to October. We look forward to the doors opening up and AT coming back in country. We had such a fabulous lineup of executives for AT to meet, and unfortunately he arrived in the last plane on Sunday, and then spent a week with us. A number of appointments were cancelled, unfortunately, but understandably, and then he managed to fly back, not quite home. He had lives in Singapore sometimes, so he actually went back to his home in Hawaii, which he's still at now. So we look forward to welcoming you back, AT, liaising with New Zealand Defence Industry Association, and catching up with Jenny and JR when you're here.
So,
that sounds good.
So interestingly, AT, reading the newspapers this morning about bringing in movie actors, maybe if you can brush up your acting skills, we can get you in sooner rather than later.
That's Tom Cruise.
Yeah, this is his audition tape right here.
So we'll send it through and say this actor's here.
Yes,
for the
excellent.
next movie.
Well, I love New Zealand so much. I've spent a couple of vacations there, and I visited a lot of the production facilities that are resident in country. So you guys have quite your own industry. Look forward to participating.
Fabulous. We'll have a word with a few people and see if we can get your part.
Excellent.
Get you back
Good.
sooner.